Well, I think people will probably still be logging on and getting connected, but we will go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here. I am Danielle Hendricks. I am the head of sales at Pixo and happy to have you here. If you haven't heard of Pixo before, you're not familiar with, but hopefully you are, we are a software consultancy in Urbana, and we create custom websites, apps, and software that put people first and address unique challenges. There are a few logistics for today, a few details. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Jenna to introduce herself before we get started.
Hi everyone, I'm Jenna. I also work at Pixo. I'm the account coordinator here. So I work closely with Danielle and Tyler. We are recording today's webinar, as I'm sure you heard the lovely, polite voice as you enter the room, recording in progress. We're going to share that with everyone that attends the webinar today. If you know of anyone else who might find this information useful, any colleagues, friends, family, enemies, but couldn't make it today, just let me know and we will connect with them as well and make sure to get them the right information. Also, if you have questions that come up throughout the presentation today, you're welcome to pop those into the chat. I can keep an eye on the chat today and we'll make sure that Tyler gets to them. If you'd rather ask your questions directly, we're also going to have some time at the end for a Q&A, live Q&A after the presentation today. And lastly, our door is always open. We love chatting with folks who are interested in what we do. Even if you don't have a particular project right now, Danielle's always up for a conversation. I know that. We're always up for questions as well, whether they're project related or otherwise. We just love to talk. And as Tyler said, or as Danielle said, rather, you'll hear from Tyler soon. We will have some links that will be popping in the chat for reference. So keep an eye on the chat, regardless if you have questions or not. There'll be some helpful info for you there.
Thank you, Jenna. Yes, I know questions are always one of those things in a webinar. You're like hesitant. Do I ask? Do I not? We love them. However, you're most comfortable. If you want to leave your camera off, your microphone muted, that is fine. Like Jenna said, pop them in the chat. But if you want to come on and say hello, we're also happy with that too. And I am excited now to turn it over to Tyler to introduce himself and our topic for today. So Tyler, on to you.
Hi, thanks, Danielle. My name is Tyler Edwards. I'm the senior designer here at Pixo. So yeah, thank you all for making this time. This is fantastic. I will say, in addition to what Danielle said, do whatever you feel comfortable with when it comes to your Zoom presence here. But I love seeing your faces too. So even if you're just like working on something, like it's a free webinar, I can keep trucking on something. But I'll just keep my camera off. You can turn it on. I love faces. I love the visual affirmation to what I'm talking about. So it's up to you. But nonetheless, you made the time to be here today, and I'm really thankful that you would spend that time with us. So, as I said, I'm the senior designer here at Pixo. I have been building all kinds of different websites for different people for nearly 10 years here with this incredible team at Pixo. And so, yeah, and I'm thankful to be talking about this opportunity here today to see if I can help you better prep for your upcoming web project. So real quick, just before we get started here and get a good understanding of who's in the room today, whether it's a complete redesign or maybe you're building something from scratch or making some serious upgrades, how many of you are just on the precipice right now of a new web project? I want to see, hands, or you can say it in the chat or whatever. I'm just curious, like, how many of you are like, maybe you just started it, or maybe, all right, Renee, I see it. Oh man, several people. That's awesome. Yeah, you're just like, I've got something on the horizon here. We got a new project coming out, building a website from. Oh, this is great. Oh, thank you. Please bring them in here. Yeah. Yes. Very cool, Casey. Awesome. Very glad that's happening. I hope you listen very carefully today. I've got some great ideas for you. That's awesome. Well, thank you. Hey, so I'm curious, as these are all rolling here and in here, and you're talking about these projects, what are some of your, and feel free to just talk out loud right now. That's usually how we talk, out loud, but feel free to actually speak with your voice. What are some of your biggest concerns right now going into a project? Like, what are just some of the challenges, concerns, things that you're worried about as you're getting ready to step into it? Broken links, that's good. Managing new site, absolutely.
I think the organization, I think that's one thing that we're really worried about is keeping everything all organized as we transition.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. My goodness. I mean, all the content, all the communication, all the design, there's so much to keep in order. Yeah. Seamless migration of content. Absolutely. Precious. That's right on. Awesome. Thank you all for sharing those concerns. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure you are very concerned. It's heavy to step into a project like this. I mean, it's big and maybe even bigger than you realize. Um, but my hope today is to hopefully alleviate some of those concerns, as well as prepare you to, kick your individual projects off. So, um, as someone who's worked on a website and website after website over the years with just an array of different companies and organizations, I found that, or actually, you know what? Before I jump in here, let me share my screen. There we go. Get some slides for you. So yeah, I've found that over the years, one of the biggest, oh man, I really just jumped through these. Okay, one of the biggest time and quality and budget draining issues is when the client, the person who's person maybe in your position, actually neglects to bring all of the key ingredients to the table of the project as we begin. And so key ingredients. What am I talking about here? Hear me out. There is a French term called mise en place. And my French is impeccable, so I definitely nailed that accent. Mise en place. It means everything in its place. And the idea is that before a chef begins cooking a dish, they spend time beforehand laying out every ingredient, every utensil, every pot and pan, every serving dish that the recipe requires. Doing so allows them to cook without the wasted time and cognitive overload of finding each of those items as they're cooking. And I do this all the time. Like even when I'm just making something as simple as like grilled cheese sandwiches for my kids, if I don't get out the butter and the bread and the cheese and the knife and the pan and the plates before I get started, I will inevitably take like 15 or 20 minutes longer than I should, and I'll end up burning one of those toasty boys in the process. So if you want to maximize your budget, stay on brand, and ensure that the website lives up to the vision that you have for it, and there are actually several foundational components that you can start gathering right now to better secure that reality. And I'm not talking about like terribly technical things here either. I'm talking about brand colors and logos and photography, written content, peer examples, design inspiration, and stuff like that. And if you spread those ingredients out on the table before the project begins, you will undoubtedly empower your web team to do the best work possible. The challenge for you, of course, is to identify and organize those ingredients. And I know organization was something already on our mind here. So that's what we're going to do together right now. I'm going to walk you through a list of foundational elements that you can assemble before your project, and I'm going to share some tools to help you better organize those ingredients for your team as well. So let's get to it. First and foremost, your web team needs to learn all that they can about you and your organization, and more specifically, your mission, your identity, and your goals. If this website will ultimately represent you and your services, your company, your organization, then your web team will need to function out of a better understanding of who you are, what you offer, why you exist. So, what key informational ingredients can you gather before a project to best communicate those points to your team? Firstly, your mission statement. Keep jumping around in my notes here. Your mission statement is a great place to start. We exist to ... But don't just end there. Take it a little further. How do you practically see that mission through? This doesn't have to be terribly detailed either, like just a few bullet points. This content may actually already be available on your current website or somewhere within your organization. We exist to ... and we do so by blank, right? Pretty familiar. So say you're an ag tech company, right? We exist to help farmers increase their yield every year by creating tools that help monitor progress throughout the planting season, by offering educational opportunities, and by building a network of farmers who share insights. Bingo, bango, right? Mission statement. Here's another what to include. What is your organization's identity? That may seem a little harder to grasp, but let me help you here. During our research process, our content strategists usually make time to walk through an identity defining card sort activity. Maybe you're familiar with card sorts. They can be used for all kinds of things, but we do this here for identifying your unique personality as an organization. So during that time, you and your team will review maybe 40 to 50 adjectives as you sort them into these 3 different categories: who you're not, who you hope to be, and who you are and are known to be. So the goal is that at the end of that time, you and your team may come to agree that your organization is best identified as, say, modern, bold, and approachable. And like, those seem like they're just words, like nice adjectives, but those 3 descriptors really serve as a guiding light for your web team, especially your designers. So as someone who is a designer and speaking from that perspective, this gives me the space to explore so much personality for your website. And finally, what are your goals for this future website? And this can be very simple. I mean, as simple as like to make more money, or to increase enrollment, or to sell more products, or to create more awareness of such and so on. What is the purpose of this website, and how can your team better achieve that goal? And this will enable your web team to make goal-oriented decisions. You know, should we put a button here? I don't know. Does it serve the higher goal? Yes. Then yes, do it. So here's what I encourage you to do. Before your project begins, just open up a simple Word document, Google Docs, whatever you prefer, and make a list of these key ingredients. No need to format it in any special way. No need to make it more than a page long. Just give your team a simple list, right, of your mission statement, and the practicals that back it, your identity, say in 3 adjectives: modern, bold, approachable is that example, and your goal for the new website, say increase enrollment. That simple list right there will put your project weeks ahead of schedule. I absolutely guarantee it. All right, let's keep going. Your audience. So another key ingredient that you can bring to the table is your audience. Who is your target audience? Who follows you now, and who are you hoping to reach? As much as this website will represent you and your services, it is ultimately for them. When we put others first, we will always succeed. I'll stand by that all the time. When we put others first, we will always succeed, especially when it comes to building websites. So we must put your particular audience at the center of the process. So who's your audience? Who are you specifically looking to reach? And that might feel maybe a little broad to consider holistically. So here's what I would suggest. Try to group your audience into 3 different categories by priority. And this is a conversation you can have with your team as well. So for example, you may be developing a new website for the university that you work for. What 3 types of site visitors are you prioritizing? Well, first and foremost, if we think back to our goals in the previous point, if that goal of your new website is to increase enrollment, then I imagine your primary audience will be prospective students, right? High school age kids looking to take that next step after they graduate. So then our secondary group will be the folks who will enable those students to attend your school, probably parents and guardians of those students. And thirdly, to make sure your school is worth attending, we want to focus on potential faculty and staff, you know, people who will be visiting your website looking for a new teaching or career opportunity in the future. So prospective students, parents and guardians, and potential faculty and staff. Now, let's dig a little deeper into each of those categories. What are they like? What is your audience like? What are their specific needs, and how will your website help to meet them? What are their biggest challenges? What pain points do they have with, say, your current website, or maybe others that are like it, other peer websites like it? And honestly, here's the biggest one. What do you want them to learn, and what do you want them to do through your website? Big questions. Now, again, this doesn't need to be comprehensive. When we're jotting this down and bringing it to the table, this doesn't have to be, you know, some published anthropological journal here. Like in that same Word doc you open for your, your mission, identity, and goals, just jot down your 3 priority groups and a few just brief insights on each of them. I promise you, it will be well worth your time. One other thing I want to encourage is to think critically about people that your web team can actually speak to, members from your audience, actual members from your audience who would be willing to engage in conversation, to speak to their needs, to speak to all of these things that would give them affirmation for their decision making along the way. When we get those people in mind, when we actually engage with them, then that really changes our perspective. When we remember who we're doing it for, how we're benefiting them, how we're serving them, and how it's going to have an impact. When you bring an understanding of your audience like this to the table, and you bring people like that to the table, you can ensure that their needs will be the driving force behind every decision both you and your web team makes. Okay, 2 down, 4 more to go. I hope this is helping so far. Next, another critical ingredient to share with the team is a list of your peers and their websites. So what other organizations, what other companies, what other people exist out there that are kin to yours, and what do their websites look like? Now, this one may require a little bit of exploration on your own, but I would strongly encourage you to do it if you want to set your web team up for success. So just, if you can, set aside an hour to visit the websites of these different peers of yours individually. Take some time just scrolling through each page as if you were an authentic audience member looking to use their services. And as you do, looking at that same Word document I'm coming back to that you're just filling out, prepping for this table here, take screenshots and add some quick notes. What aspects are working for you? What is deterring you from continuing to use their website? What would you potentially like to emulate on your own site? And what should you avoid? So again, pretending I'm the director of communications at that university again, though I gave myself a little bit of a promotion here. I've come to Illinois State University's website. And I'm scrolling down the homepage and I think, oh, hey, I really like that view by program or the interest section at the top of the page. That seems really useful. Screenshot, paste, notes, keep going. Come down to another section on the application page. The section it's about applying, but these links, they send you away from the application page itself. That seems tricky. That's weird. No, thank you. Screenshot, paste, notes, continue, and on and so on. So leveraging your peers like this it's incredibly beneficial for your team. Many of your peers have already done the hard work of creating a similar website as yours. So now your team can glean what's working and abandon what's not for your own. And if you mise en place those ingredients, it's going to save your research team days of work. All right. Now, this one's really straightforward and absolutely crucial for your website's design, at the very least. Gather up all of your brand assets and bring them to the table. I'm the designer here, and so I'm going to be banging this drum as hard as I can. Now, for larger, more established kind of companies, or I've been referencing universities, you will most likely already have some kind of detailed brand style guide to share with your team. And if that's something you have access to, then please share that. Like, give us that style guide. It's so helpful. It's tasty. I use it all day. That's great. But whether you have one or not, I'm going to get really specific about what your designer is looking for, what they will really need, and what will make their life so much better and your project so much better if you bring it to the table. So first, logos. Bring every logo file you can get your hands on. So I mean, every relevant iteration of your logo, every composition of it, every color version of your logo, and every file type you have available. So a lot of times, your logo, especially for larger companies, you have different versions of it. You have just the symbol, you have the text, you have different lockups, you have different colors. We need them all, because otherwise I'm going to have to go find them somewhere else. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with large companies and they neglect to send those to me, and I have to go to brandsoftheworld.com and download the logo they made that is the version of it, and it's not helpful. I want to make sure that we are on target, on brand the whole time. And listen, if you want to be your designer's best friend, make sure you include the vector file types. If you're not familiar with that word, vector is just a fancy word for not having any pixels. It doesn't get pixelated when you blow it up. It increases in size by math. And so those file types specifically are, you'll see .svg, .eps, .ai, so that's an Illustrator file, and many PDFs can be a vector as well. So logos, colors. What are your primary company colors? What are your secondary and tertiary colors? What are your preferred neutral colors? Do you use any gradients, any predefined gradients that we should know about? What color combinations should we use, and what are ones that should be avoided entirely? I mean, this is the painter's palette that your designer will be drawing from. You don't want to give them free rein on choosing color, because it's going to make you go really far away from your brand as we begin to develop this site that is really the visual representation of your brand. It's important that you, of all people, bring these colors to the table. Otherwise, they may have to sample it from somewhere else, and that runs the risk of those colors not being correct. Typography. So more specific, that's just the fun design word, typography. That makes it sound cool. It's like if you're a garbage worker and you call yourself a garbologist. But typography, I mean, like, what fonts do you use to represent your organization? What weights and sizes and combinations should your team be using? And the files, man, those precious font files, please share those with your team if you have them. Now, to be sure, sometimes fonts can be tricky due to licensing agreements, especially licensing for the web. So for example, if your company uses like Adobe Typekit fonts, make sure you have the proper licensing in place before those fonts go up on the website. And I can go into the details of that, but it's easy to search for, but we'd be happy to answer those questions too. But a safe bet is always to use Google Fonts or something similar to it. All of their web licensing is free, and your web team can just access them on their own using the Google Fonts website. All right, graphic elements. So this one's a little more kind of ventures away from the more specific, but do you have any graphic elements or different visual patterns that represent your brand? So I grabbed this here. This is from the University of Illinois. They have a good example of here are different patterns they use. And so in this images, you see that they have these different kind of like halftone color filters that they use on certain images. They have this one where they kind of split that halftone with a real full colored image, and then they have this other kind of graphic element down here in the bottom right that uses these wavy lines. They have several others too, but they're ones that they try and use in their marketing at times. They use on the web, and so this is something they may want to encourage you to use on the website. You may have something similar to that, and so if you've got something like that, please bring files for it if you've got those files, so that the designers aren't having to recreate it themselves. That would be a huge help. And then photography, man, as the designer, I cannot begin to tell you how helpful it is when the client brings photography to the table. Oh man, if your organization has an archive of images, please share that resource with your team. Photography, it communicates so much more than we presume. And designing a website with, say, just like placeholder images that we're getting from stock photo websites, they can really detract from the vision of the website as we're working on it. And they can even be misleading to other stakeholders when we're sharing mock-ups, and people within your organization might say like, well, who's this person? What do they represent? Why are they there? I don't know, but now you're only thinking about the image and not the design. And so photography is really important. Now, you may not have a wealth of photography, and that's okay. I would encourage you then to take some time to define what kind of photography would be most representative of your organization. How much photography do we actually want to use? And if we are going to be using it, what do we want to see in those images? What would be most helpful? What really captures the vision of who we are and what this website should represent? That way the designer will have to do a lot less work finding, stock photography or taking pictures themselves, whatever resources they might have. And as you begin to gather all these things up, so we're talking about these brand assets. As you're gathering all these things up, if they're not already organized in some other space because of the company or the organization you work for, you can simply add them to some kind of web-based file storage tool like like Google Drive or Dropbox or Box, whatever you might use, and share that link with your designers at the kickoff meeting. And I promise you, it's going to feel like Christmas morning to that designer. It is going to be so very helpful. All right. Next, another great ingredient set out for your team is any written content you would like to include on this website. Now, I'm not saying that you need to know exactly what your new website is going to communicate on every page, at this point. That will be far easier to determine as that design and that structure and those pages begin to take real shape. That's something you're going to work on with your team over the period of time. However, now is a great time to begin looking through, say, your current website, if you have one, and determining what content should be included, what should be revised, and what should be left behind. And no need to rewrite it yourself yet either. That's not something that we're looking for you to do. Just head back to that same Word document that I keep referencing. Include a list of just pages and sections that fit within those three categories. I want to keep this. We want to revise this. We want to delete this. Also, if your company has any, say, key phrases or maybe taglines or campaigns that you're running or any detailed legal information that needs to be included on the website, bring that all as well. Jot that down. That's going to be super helpful ahead of schedule, because we're going to find ourselves in a place where down the road, content is king. Design is really led by content, and if we're designing the website down the way, and we find later that, well, there's actually some really critical things that we needed to include when it comes to our written content, then that is going to inevitably change the shape of things. And so the sooner we can start talking about content, the sooner we can start bringing that to the table, the better it's going to be. Okay, last one. Here we go. And this is the most enjoyable. We talked earlier about gathering a list of peers and their websites. And some of those websites may be good models to emulate. That's great. But are there any other websites out there that inspire you? Have you come across any design or component or composition ideas across the web that had you thinking, man, like if our website looked like this, if it functioned like this, if it included this, that would be incredible. That would really put us over the edge. That would really capture the vision that we've been talking about from the beginning. If that's true, find those websites and share those links. Sharing a list of inspiring websites like that really empowers your team to overcome that dreaded blank canvas. Like simply communicating your vision for the website with words, it can only take your team so far. But when you use actual examples of websites that strike close to that vision, it will give your designers and your engineers a much clearer picture to shoot for. And there are plenty of great tools to help you search for inspiring web design as well. You don't have to go to a blank Google page and say, show me good design. I've been there, I've done that. Really great tools here that I often use just as a designer when it comes to going into each project I go into. So I'd encourage you to bookmark these bad boys and surf through them before your project begins. So we've got Best Website Gallery, Site Inspire, Design Inspiration. They're all fun names, right? Site Inspire, one word. Design Inspiration, how fun. And One Page Love, that's a real good one too. Those are links that we can share in the chat. Thank you very much. And as you're looking through these, as you're looking for inspiration and you're finding things that are really motivating you, things that are getting you excited for your website, I want to encourage you, don't let budget or time hamper your ideas at this point. Like it's really easy to see something and be like, oh, that'd be really cool, but our budget's limited. Don't worry about that yet. Just have a little fun. Get excited about what your website can truly be. I mean, your team will share in that excitement with you, and they're going to develop a vision with you that best suits your needs and will keep you in step with your budget. Like, so maybe we can't do all of these bells and whistles, but there are aspects of those bells and there are aspects of those whistles that we can include. So get excited about it. Grab those ideas, bring them to the table. All right, let's review all those key ingredients here. As you set out to begin developing a new website with your web team here, as you're all on the precipice of it right now and you're thinking about it, do all that you can to bring these foundational items to the table. And that is your organization's mission, your identity, capturing a few adjectives, and your goals for the website, your audience. So remember those 3 target groups and maybe some insights on each of those, your peers, and then some examples from their websites, things, screenshots, things that are working, things that aren't working. Your brand assets, those logos, that color, the typography, the graphic elements, the photography, your written content. So what are you keeping from the current website, and what are you revising, and what are you ditching? And your inspiration. What other websites are getting you excited for your own? And when you take the time to gather ingredients like these before your next project, your web team will have everything they need to maximize your budget, stay on brand, and to ensure that the website lives up to the vision that you have for it. All right, so thank you so much for your time. I hope that's been really helpful. I hope that maybe eases some some concerns and some anxiety going into this. But we've got plenty of time right now. If you all have questions, I would love to see if I can answer them to the best of my ability, or maybe Jenna and Danielle can as well. Or maybe we can just have an open conversation. Here we are as people enjoying time with one another. Let's do that. I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see your faces for the conversation, even though this is a fun gift and you're welcome for that.
I'll hop in while people think about questions and just quickly do a shout out to somebody here that is on the my screen. I see a name, photography. I don't know, Holly, if you wanted to share your information in the chat, but as Tyler was talking about that, we have an awesome photographer that is listening in. So if you need help with photography, I'm just going to give a little shout out to Holly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it is. Oof, it's key to have an actual photographer in your back pocket. Oh man. That like, hey, we don't have good photos right now, but I do know a good photographer. Maybe we can bring them in for a day and really do some good work. So call Holly, by all means.
Yeah, so I don't think I saw any questions pop up in the chat throughout the presentation, but if you have any questions now, feel free to unmute yourself. If you don't feel like talking, you can also put a question in the chat and I will read it to Tyler, or, he can read, so he could read it too.
Barely.
Jenna, I was trying to type into the chat, but it wasn't letting me. So I will just ask it. I am an individual under a company umbrella. So the company has a website, and off the record, it sucks. So I want to have my own that I can just leg to from the company, right? So if somebody comes in, looks at all the other people in the company, they can click on me and create that. But I'm going to start from ground zero. So what kind of timeline are we talking about? And then can you speak a little bit towards expense?
I can speak a little bit to that,
yeah,
Jim. Yeah. So it's interesting. When you're thinking about budget, you can find freelancers and do an inexpensive, quick, cheap website for a couple $100, or you could work with an agency like us and you're going to be spending more than that to get your website created. But it's like when you're building a house, say, you have 1,000 square foot house, but inside those walls, you could spend $100,000 or you could spend $1 million and you still will have 1,000 square foot house. So it's what you want inside of those walls, just like a website, and how much you need help with. So there is a lot of variables that go into cost. We use a lot of WordPress when we do build websites, but there are certainly lots of avenues for people to choose if they're doing something on their own. You could certainly use WordPress on your own as well, but there's lots of options out there. It's probably way more than I could even talk about in any webinar or any few minutes that we have, but I'm happy to explore questions that you have.
All right, time frame. If we came in with that sheet filled up with all those items Tyler is talking about, start to finish, obviously everybody's going to tweak, right? Custom building a house, nothing ever goes the way the plans are. Second part of that, and I knew that first question was a hard one. So what about ongoing monthly maintenance expense, that type of thing?
Yeah, so with timeline, like for us to do a project, if we're building a website from scratch, I probably wouldn't give it less than 4 months to do it from start to finish. But again, it's going to depend on how big of a website we're building. We've had some that have taken longer because of how big those projects are. For ongoing expense, there will be some kind of hosting fee you'll pay. There'll be probably a maintenance of some kind to make sure that there are security updates going on, and anything within your website gets checked on a regular basis to make sure performance is good and everything is up to date. But again, that is also going to be a big, wide variety of what you want to spend budget-wise. And who you would go with, whether that's like a freelancer or somebody that's like us that could do that as well, be an hourly fee for as much as you need done throughout the year. So my favorite answer to those questions is it depends, which is not always the most helpful when it comes to thinking about budget, but there are just a lot of variables when it comes to that as well.
Thanks, Jem. I'm sorry you weren't able to type in the chat. If anybody else is having a similar issue, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask questions. Jim asked a couple of great ones. We are happy to help.
And I'll say too, so a lot of this stuff that I talked about today, that bringing to the table, you may actually have seen that today and thought like, oh man, like you're saying it's not too hard. There's not too much here, but that still feels like a mountain to me, especially in the midst of my role. Like I've got a lot going on. But that's also something if your web team was Pixo and we were building that project with you. We would very much also enter into a research part of a research phase where a lot of that stuff we would be exploring together and helping you define. And so maybe there's some things that you just can't quite get to the bottom of, especially when it comes to your identity or your goals. Like, what are your goals, or what is your mission, or whatever it might be. There's so much that our content strategists and our research team can help you define as well. And so you don't have to do it alone by any means, but as much as you can do, it makes the process so much better.
Hey, I had a quick question. Okay, so say that we go through you and get a website, completed. How does that upkeep look like? I know you said security updates, but I'm thinking more of the design side. That's where my brain lives. Would we have control over that, or I guess would it depend on how we host that?
Great question. When it comes to maintenance on the design side of things, like there's a maintenance kind of contract that we'd write up, and we would set aside a certain amount of time over the course of however long to if you've got something that starts to fall apart, reach out and we'll jump in and we'll fix it right up. But also, at least when I'm talking about design for the most part is also going to be something that we think really long term about it. We want to put that kind of power into your hands to make it your own over time and to be very timeless. And so the design will most of the time not be something that should be a concern or something that comes up, unless you as the company decide, what, that orange we've been using is wrong and we got to tweak it just a little bit here. Then that's something that makes sense. We can come in and do what we can. But yeah. That all fits under that kind of maintenance umbrella, and there's that time is very generally used if whatever the needs are met.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and I'll chime in too that we have something I can send out afterwards with this webinar that talks about maintenance options. We don't really talk about design in this piece, so that's a really great question actually, and thank you, Tyler, for jumping in on it. but just kind of things to think about when it comes to ongoing maintenance, preventative maintenance, and even content, like when you're thinking about doing that as a company and how you're going to make sure that what you're having on your website is evergreen, or either somebody can, easily update it. So thinking about all those different types of things, there's different options for maintenance. So we can certainly send that out as well for people to poke at and look at for ideas when it comes to that realm. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining. We can certainly give you the last 20 minutes of this hour back of your day. Unless anybody wants to stick around for more questions, we're happy to be here. But thank you again for joining us, and hope that you've taken a little piece of knowledge away from Tyler's chat today.
Thanks for being here, everyone. Really appreciate it. Great to see you.
Hey, Tyler, I had a quick question for you.
Hey, hit me.
Hey, so like as a designer, we often like gather up so many different fonts over time that we have access to that aren't necessarily going to be accessible to, the client we're working with. When you approach those situations and you're like, okay, this is kind of what I need for this project, is it something where you're just passing along, hey, in order to use this font, you're going to have this kind of licensing fee associated with it, or how does that get approached?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be a conversation, especially when it comes to, if your example is font licensing, you've got to bring that up as soon as possible. And so from the very beginning, if I'm receiving brand and style guides and I see the fonts and I see that the fonts are like purchased from like Typewolf, I'm like, oh, all right, like, hey, I see this, they're cool fonts, that's great. What kind of licensing do you have? Like, do you have access to that? You do? Okay, great. Can you extend that to us? Great. Do you have that for the web? Great. If you don't, then you've got to go seek that out, because that was an investment that, like, you made. This is your company. You said that we want this font. But if I'm choosing fonts, like if it's actually, not defined, and it's up to me to kind of establish that style and choose typography, I'm usually as a designer, like, there's so much of me that just wants to go find like something really wickedly awesome. And at the same time, like, if I'm building for the web, I want to be really wise about what's there. And I know that Google Fonts are a really good, safe bet for that. So yeah, it's just got to be an open conversation though. Is there anything else you're thinking of, like, that you have in mind, or was fonts kind of the thing on your mind?
It was pretty much on my mind, because I think the thing I've ran into with like some of the websites I've worked with are people that don't necessarily have their brand guidelines set yet, but also they have like a certain kind of feel to their visual identity that obviously normally requires some kind of like display type font, or
Sure.
something that's not in the typical that you're going to use for some kind of header section or something.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the question behind it, or the reason behind the question, because again, we acquire a catalog of fonts over time, and it's like, is it
Yeah.
worth adding to a budget to be able to use a display font in just a few portions of a website versus, okay, hey, if you really want this feel, you have to realize it's going to cost extra, kind of thing.
Yeah, and honestly, you're doing the work of a designer to communicate those things. Like, if you mask those things and just thought like, well, my job is just to make it look great, and so I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to kind of close my eyes to the consequences of it, then that's not helpful to them. Like, what's helpful is that you communicate very clearly, hey, this is the style you've set out for yourselves, or this is what we've been establishing together. This is really great, but it's also going to require this. And so if you're ready to, stay committed to that, then by all means, go for it. If not, we can find some alternatives. We can just vector out some of these larger titles and put in alt text and just have them there, and then we can use some more trustworthy Google Fonts or whatever it might be underneath of that, body copy, whatever it might be. But yeah, man, Yeah. Also, Josh, since I got you, man, I don't know if we've talked before. I feel like maybe we've talked before, but man, you're a righteous designer, dude. I love your work. I love your
Thank you.
illustration. Yeah, man.
Thank-
It's
I
I'm glad you
appreciate
came
it.
today.
Yeah,
Man.
I think this is our first actual formal conversation. So I always appreciate jumping on the webinars you guys host and picking up knowledge along the way to try and further myself. So certainly appreciate it.
Awesome, dude. Well, I appreciate that, man. But no, I've been following your stuff for a while now, and it's baller. So great work.
Thank you.
Hey, man. Well, Jim, unless you got anything else, my man.
No, thanks for you guys putting this on. Tell Melinda hi if you talk to her, okay?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank
We'll talk to you later.
Bye, everybody.
Josh, back out though. No, it's fine.